Hello. Thank you everyone for joining the next in our series of fireside chats. Those of you who've joined us for a few of these will know that we love nothing better here at Lexis than finding really interesting people or firms that are doing things that are interesting and different. And today's quite special because we've got an interesting person who works and leads an interesting firm. So I'm delighted to introduce Kate Bennett, who's from Arbor Law, who's going to talk to us a little bit about some of the things she's done. My name is Matthew Leopold. I work for LexisNexis, where I look after market insight. But we're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about Kate. Now, Kate is the co-founder and the director of Arbor Law, which is a London-headquartered boutique firm renowned for both corporate, financial services, TMT, securities, and governance practices. So never a quiet moment. Arbor has also got a distinct offer, such as its flexible virtual general counsel model solution, which is a really interesting thing that we are most definitely going to be exploring later on in this short fireside chat. Kate has more than 2 decades of experience, not that you guess it, across London and Chicago and a number of international global markets. Kate trained and practiced as a corporate and securities lawyer at Baker McKenzie before she moved in-house, where she served and then gained experience in capital raising, mergers and acquisitions, and then also, just to compound all of that, also took on the role as a UK general counsel for 2 different FTSE 250 companies. So in founding Arbor, Kate returned herself back to private practice, and whilst continuing her own legal practice, she's focused on capital raising, financial services, regulatory compliance, and this virtual general counsel solution. And this has given Kate quite a unique perspective on legal leadership from a commercial point of view. Kate herself has been recognized for many of the things that she's done. She's been recognized on the Innovate Finance Women in FinTech Power List, both in 2023 and 2024. And this year was named the Law Firm Leader of the Year at the Women and Diversity in Law Awards for boutique firms. Most particularly, she's an advocate of DE&I centered cultures in law firms, and particularly the inclusion of neuro-inclusive working practices. Again, something we are definitely going to explore on this fireside chat. So, Kate, thank you so much for joining us. I hope I didn't butcher your experience too much there in the introduction. But let me start. Tell us a little bit about Arbor Law, right? You're trying to approach the market quite differently from other private practice firms. So what is it that makes Arbor different? Talk to us about your business model and definitely explain the general counsel model that you've got in market.
No, thank you for having me, first of all. So I think from my own experiences of obviously working in big law and internationally, then being a GC and obviously purchasing services, procuring them, and also working in an in-house environment, alongside the board. To me, there was always sort of an issue with the traditional, law firm model, like the big law model, in the sense that I feel like you had the hierarchies, you had the excessive costs, layers and layers of people before you actually had any sort of access to senior counsel. And then I guess in the GC context, oftentimes people you're getting weren't really commercial. A lot of them had never even worked in a business before, and oftentimes it's very different in terms of just obviously risk. You just want to know the risk, and then you make a decision, not necessarily a large memo. And the fact was that obviously in the bigger law firms, it's lawyers are churning and working so hard. There's a commercial model with the billable hour targets that, in my mind, I find it's an actual conflict of interest in terms of clients. I don't understand how you can sort of say you're client focused and client serviced, and you're trying to deliver cost efficiencies or efficiencies in service when really the incentives are to bill as much as you can, and that's how value is viewed. So for us, it was all about coming back into private practice, and my co-founders are also for Baker McKenzie, which was an amazing firm. So it's nothing against them in any shape or form, but it's more about trying to create a different model that actually creates that flexibility, right? Reduces the costs, because I think it's the spiraling costs that seem out of control for clients. And to me, it's not sustainable. The hourly rates keep going up. And at the end of the day, SMEs basically are shut out. And that's like 90% of businesses, right, in the UK. And to me, that doesn't seem right. Like, legal, like high caliber legal support should not just be accessible to the big corporates who can afford it. So for us, it was all about trying to create a firm that was an alternative to big law, and doing so in a way that you kept that quality. So like we kind of say big law plus, but like no baggage, in the sense of like not the politics, not the toxic environments, not the hierarchies, not that pressure for the billable, hour requirements. And try to go back to basics as to why we all became lawyers, right? To give the best client service you could, and to basically like work in a healthy environment around other people who are of the same top quality. And I think from the GC experience we had, it's also with commercial experience. So what we tried to do then is obviously we only have senior lawyers. We're a senior model only, which then gives direct access to the senior lawyers. Like the client has direct access. You don't have to go through the hierarchy. And every single one of our lawyers who does a lot of like sort of our in-house general counsel work, which I'll talk about in a second, has also been a GC or has been, in a senior in-house role. And it's kind of that dual perspective, I think, that is missing in law firms as well, that it just creates more pragmatism and, to be honest, better service. So that's where we sort of created the model. And it's more of a flexible model, and to be honest, that's the only way you can contain costs, because without the overheads, we're a city firm, but we have modest offices, don't have huge ones. With the consultancy model, we can contain overheads, and that gets sort of passed on to the clients. And then there's transparency for the consultants as well in terms of the remuneration. It's fair, it's incentivized, they feel motivated. And I guess probably the more important point is culture as well. Obviously, the client service is paramount, but to me, it was so important to create an environment that it is possible to practice law at this level with the like top clients. We have multinationals. I mean, it's the same client base, but without that sort of toxic environment where it's inclusive, where people don't feel like they have to justify their existence with FaceTime, with being in the office all the time, or having to bill as many hours to show their value when value actually is what you deliver to the client. So sort of trying to create that inclusive culture that I feel like is still missing, from traditional law firm models, simply because of the commercial mechanism and just sort of I guess it's a bit conservative and stale.
Well, that's really, I'm really telling that the point you keep making there about billable hours and the value of those billable hours, and I think that will resonate with an awful lot of people across the legal industry, and I can completely see how Arbor is countering some of that big law. But were there any more issues with the traditional legal model that you were hoping to solve, and how did Arbor actually address those issues?
Yeah, so I mean, I think so it's I guess probably put in really simple terms, it's like the economics, the commercials, to make it more like accessible, same quality of service but cost efficient to a client. I mean, we still do billable hours, there's no question. It depends on how your different billing arrangements, but it's taking out that sort of perverse incentive to have those targets, right, which are just encouraging bad behavior, frankly. I mean, the amount of padding of hours, and then the hierarchy too, we got rid of with a senior model only. There's no hierarchy. So instead of sort of going through the trainee, the junior, the mid-level, all the way to the top and only getting that senior expertise, like parachuted in at the very end, you get that from the start at Arbor. It just makes service delivery much more efficient as well. And then it's also that commercial pragmatism, the experience, the real life experience that these people have, it can bring to the table, which means it's risk-based, really. I mean, we're not going to give you a 35-page memo on a question that is like, well, these are the risks, then let us know, do you want us to, delve further into it? So it's taking out the hierarchy, and then being able to reduce cost. And the other way to reduce the cost, right, is sort of that virtual consultancy model. And I have to also admit, like, it's the ability to innovate, the ability to create a culture where it's okay to put new ideas forward. It's like safe to do so, because at the end of the day, clients are constantly evolving, like in their needs, and services have to evolve to do so. So, it's having that agility, I think, also of being like a lean structure, having that flexibility, but also the mindset is super important. to be able to move with your client versus sort of in a rigid structure. So the idea was just to basically flip it on its head, frankly, flip the entire model, tackle sort of all the issues that we faced, or clients face and lawyers face, right, in big law. Take the best of it, keep that quality, keep the caliber. Every single one of our lawyers has worked for city multinational firms and has that in-house. So the caliber is the same, but then also the commercial piece is just to flip the whole model to sort of challenge what those issues and pressures are and to try to create that environment. We think it is possible. We've sort of proven it is possible. But there's just a lot of, I guess it's a model that's known in the legal industry, the traditional legal model. And oftentimes if you're different, if you're something else, it's viewed as not as good or inferior. Mm. And so it's sort of getting over that hurdle that there is no difference in what we get. And actually, to be honest, we spend time at clients a lot. So they actually get us in person when we need to be. So flexibility doesn't mean distant at all. It means actually flexible to like what the client needs. And also, I'm sorry, we're all adults, right? You know, like we can decide where we want to work and how we work and what's best for us. And that to me was extremely important based on sort of that, you know, even with the RTO now, right, back in the office and sort of being told how and when and how best you function and work. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter as long as you're servicing your client. Yeah. So that to me was super important. Give people some autonomy back, some independence, some like self-worth back in a lot of ways. And then incentivize them to collaborate with each other too. So, you know, the remuneration structure is that obviously the more work you do with others, the better it is. But I think with our model too is people trust each other. And that's the other thing, like you would trust your colleagues to put in front of your best client type of thing. And that to me, like the quality is super important. And so we've got to be really, you know, strict about that as well. But so, yeah, it was to take sort of all those pieces away that are I guess, make traditional law stagnant sometimes and sort of not really in the best interest of the client in terms of the efficiencies and the cost.
So the way you present, I mean, it all just feels like common sense as you're talking through it. So this is so obvious, but there must have been some challenges as you were building that model. So what challenges did you encounter and how did you overcome those?
I think it's perception a lot of the time. I mean, at the end of the day, when sort of, you know, we're an SRA regulated law firm, but I think when sort of the flexibility started to first do a consultancy model, a lot of the firms out there were not regulated, perhaps, or quality wasn't the first priority, right? For us, that's the benchmark, is quality. Has to be there, or else it's not worth it. And I think that then sort of develops a reputation that it's like less than, or it's a step down. You know, for partners in big law, like why would you go to a consultancy model? You know, that sort of thing, like you're on this trajectory, like you have to keep going. I mean, we're also told that, to be honest. You know, people are told the success in law is to make partner and go through that track. You know, it's kind of ingrained when you're younger, at least it was for me. And you kind of feel that like you are taking risk, you're taking a step down. But I mean, in really blunt terms though, there's no way possible to reduce costs for clients when you have those overheads. Frankly, like there's none. Or billable hour targets that is perversely incentivizing people to work harder, less efficiently. And so it really is pure economics, right? In terms of that's the only way you can pass on savings to your client. But it's trying to educate about that. It's trying to say like, this is no different. The quality is no different. Everything else is no different. Actually, it's an edge in a lot of ways when you've got the commercial pragmatism and our solutions as well. And so like, I think I didn't answer your question about the virtual general counsel, but I mean, like for us, it allowed us to just develop the solution that essentially is, you know, it's that in-house virtual general counsel, VGC, fractional general counsel model. But where it is in other places, it's usually like one person that does it. And oftentimes they may not have even been a general counsel before, or it's very much like they're a jack of all trades in every respect and don't necessarily have the support that they need when specialist expertise does come along. So for us, we developed it so that you do have your dedicated VGC, but then you have your entire backbench of the Arbor team, which is full scope law firm, right? So you've got your employment data, everything else. It gives people the freedom to say, this is not my expertise. Yes, I can do so many of your different contracts. I can do the general, but you're better suited to have one of my colleagues help with this. And then, so it gives that access to what was previously only available, like for the ones who could pay, right? Who could get that access. So for SMEs, that to us is like one of the things that it's revolutionary. It gives them a competitive advantage and just the expertise they actually need at the time without expecting someone to do it all. So the model gave us that flexibility to kind of innovate and work around what we saw is needed, which is very difficult when you're in a big firm where you have to go by committee and things take forever. It's not the norm. And so it doesn't happen, right? Or it's against the commercial model, right? How does that work? So for us, it's given us the opportunity to be creative and really try to service like what the clients need.
Yeah. So I presume, so reading between the lines there, it sounds like culture is a really important part of that argument to why leave Big Law, why join consultancy, why be a fractional GC in the Arbor model. So talk to us a bit about the culture. How have you created the culture where that's acceptable? How does the culture come across in a world where you're hiring consultants, where that must be really difficult?
Yeah, I mean, so quality, like excellence, is like non-negotiable, right? I mean, if we're saying we're the caliber of Big Law, we have to be. So to me, that's reputational. We have to, obviously, that's culturally embedded. But the other piece is about conduct and behavior and mindset and inclusion, frankly. Inclusion kind of is everything about it, because at the end of the day, Big Law is like you have to conform to the model that's given to you. Right. So you can't work flexibly all that easily. If you're neurodiverse, you've got to ask for accommodations, whatever it might be. So for us, it was all about kind of bringing this back down to it. The core values, right, are like respect, your work ethic, like how you treat others, how you collaborate with others. Are you creative? Are you innovative? Like the important things that actually, like, I guess, make people better human beings, right? Which means no ego, frankly. So for us, it's like, when we're hiring, the first thing is that I don't care how big your book of business is, right? If you are going to disrespect your colleagues or not be a team player, like that's not for us, because we thrive when we work together and collaborate. But it's just that general sort of inclusion that it doesn't matter differences, right? That's respected and it's valued. It's not like tolerated. So it's just that kind of a feeling of some of these things shouldn't be issues that are. And it actually brings that sort of, I guess, wealth of thought, diversity of thought. It actually is what law firms need. But that comes with having people be independent, autonomous, flexible, not telling them exactly where they need to be and how and they work and all the rest. So it's kind of that mutual respect, but also, just absolutely respecting kind of everyone else is different, and that's okay. But you're all sort of there for the common good. So it's all about personality type, I think, in a lot of ways. But I mean, this isn't that hard, right? It's not that difficult to be like a good person, so but it's different. It's because you're not incentivized by those billable hours. You're not competing. There's no hierarchy, right? So you are all colleagues. You can respect each other. You trust each other. That takes away, I think, a lot of it too. It's not this sort of race to the top, right? You're all at the top. So it's then a question of how do we work really well together to like harness the power of it.
Yeah. Well, let me be a bit controversial and just poke you a bit harder there, right? Yeah. So culture, large law firms, Big Law can say the same thing, right? Culture is really important to them. So what is it? How do you get that cultural advantage over Big Law? And how does that then become the competitive value?
I mean, I guess, we don't have to put it in a policy, if you will, right? It's like how it's acted like on a daily basis. Firms can say that they have a culture, but like, how does that, and I would sort of challenge that. Well, how does that then mesh with your model? Like, how does that mesh with the commercial model? How does that sort of encourage innovative thought when you really only are valued on your billable hours in your output, right? Not on how well you service the client or how efficiently you do so. And I guess, it's just one of those things that it allows you just to be adept, frankly, the culture as well, that you just don't have. Like, there's not really much like outside of the box thinking in other places, because it's not really encouraged, right? Again, it doesn't go with the model. You're forced to be in the office, presenteeism still to this day with the RTO, which is unbelievable to me. You have to be there, and that is how you're valued. Like, that's your worth. But like, what about the 2 hours you had to commute to get to work? Like, wouldn't that be better spent working or doing something more efficiently? Like, to me, it just doesn't make sense. It's just the values are in the wrong places. When actually, if you take a step back, like strip it all back, what are you really trying to do? And what are the happier the lawyers are, they feel like they are not being told how, what, when can spend a bit more time with their kids in the morning, go pick up a child from school, get back to work, fine. But not being told how that has to work, it creates just a happier environment. And when lawyers sort of thrive, the client benefits, right? And that's when you get that creative thought, you get innovative solutions, you get this teamwork. It's not a grind anymore. It's actually, you can kind of really practice law how you want to, like what your purpose was originally.
Yeah, quite. I mean, it sounds like really pragmatic. Focus on the outcome, not the output.
Yes.
Really interesting answer to that. Thank you. So, I'm really interested. Well, I spend a lot of time studying and talking to the boutique law, small law owners, and expansion and growth is one of the things that is always really interesting, right? It's very difficult to stretch when you're small. And one of the things that immediately struck me was your expansion into the UAE. And I mean, that as an outsider looking at the data, that looks really bold, right? It looks quite a courageous thing to do. So talk to us a little bit about, how did that come about? What drove that decision, and why that market? Because I think a lot of people listening in would be interested to find out how you went into a completely different jurisdiction.
Yes, I mean, it's like not really a glamorous story, right? It's like at the end of the day, we had clients there. I mean, my background's emerging markets, and so are my colleagues to some extent. So the Middle East for capital raising, especially also the ADGM is the same sort of framework as the FCA. So there's so many similarities in terms of what English law essentially in the UAE is used as sort of the benchmark of all the documents when you're, raising funds, and the financial services modeled after the UK. But frankly, we had clients there. I mean, so this was it, and we needed to be more on the ground, and they wanted us there. We had to bridge that gap, and as sort of the client base sort of expanded, that were predominantly sort of based in the UAE, had a nexus to the UK in some way, and sometimes it was just UK law, but they needed that support from us, and we felt that the only way we could actually do it really well was to set up there. So it was sort of organically driven. It wasn't like a vanity project. It wasn't expansion for the sake of it. It was relationship driven. And to me, it felt natural. It didn't feel like it was this big hurrah, because they needed us there. And then I think once you're there on the ground, you develop those relationships. You develop the networks. You then meet people. It's one of these places, UAE, it's actually really relationship based as a jurisdiction. So then, once you're there, you then can branch out. And interestingly, I mean, the type of model we have is quite nascent there. It's not really known. So when people hear about it, when they experience it actually as a client, it's something that, of course, value provided, and that sort of, I guess, attention from a senior lawyer that you're not going to get from other places, it resonates. So it was quite natural.
Yeah. And did you find, so we talked about culture and about that inclusive leadership. How did that translate into a different jurisdiction?
I think it's a really interesting question, actually. I think inclusion is the backbone to everything, but that also means like multiculturalism and inclusion, having an open mind. And that is the key when you go into a different jurisdiction. It's the key when you do cross-border deals, frankly. If you can try to understand and not judge or not have any sort of pretenses, get to understand why someone thinks the way they do. Why do they negotiate the way they do? Like, what is the rationale? That is like a gift. Yeah. And so it's that inclusive sort of thinking that differences are fine. You don't fear them. You have its curiosity to better understand why and how. And so for us, it's quite natural. Then, it's great. You work with these people to understand. And so, yeah, I didn't see it as a barrier, frankly. I know people do. People do see it as a barrier. But I think when you sort of don't have a pretense and you don't have judgment, that's everything, because it really is, just getting to know someone on a different, like a better level. And then you can actually understand how they think and work with them. And even just asking the questions that you may not even know, or even asking certain questions about culture, certainly asked a ton. And it's one of these things that it just gives you that better sense and builds that sort of rapport.
Yeah. And as you scaled, right, as a small boutique firm that has scaled, what learnings or advice might you have to share with others considering a similar path?
In terms of scaling, my advice would be is don't do it for the sake of doing it, just so you can say you're a global firm or whatever it might be. Don't do it as like a vanity project. do it for the right reasons because your clients need you there, it then becomes much easier. There's no question. Because, at the end of the day, they don't want the fancy offices either, right? They want you there. So if you have a purpose to be there, you have a connection of some sort, you're doing business in the region already, then it makes sense. But I think in the absence of that, I would just think long and hard before you go in, because it's really easy to make a massive investment, spend a huge amount of money, but it's actually not really that necessary to do so. When you really, again, are kind of pulling it back and focusing on the core of what you're doing in client service.
Yeah, I could ask you a bazillion questions about this because I'm really interested in it. But I very much want to move on to talk a little bit about neurodiversity.
Yes.
You were, I understand, diagnosed with ADHD midlife, which is very, very during your life. Let's put it like
40,
that.
age 40, yeah.
And you've been very candid in the materials that you share about how it's shaped your career. So could you just explain how does ADHD actually impact you and your practice of law and your role as a leader?
To be really frank, it nearly ended my career, frankly. I think when you don't have that flexibility or that ability to be different or accepted that different, and this is again back when flexibility didn't even exist, like it wasn't even a term. But ironically, the partners I used to work with were fine with me sometimes working at home, because what would happen over time is the commute, everything. It wasn't the work, it wasn't the travel for work. I was emerging markets, it wasn't that piece. It was the FaceTime in the office. It was the commute to work that exhausted me. And I'd overcompensate. I would find the distractions in the office, like people coming knocking on your door. Like to me, it was like a nightmare. Not that I'm not friendly, but it was like, it threw me off course, and that was it. So it was a real challenge trying to conform to an environment that wasn't meant for me, like ever. And having to do so and pretending to do so all the time was exhausting and draining. I'd get physically ill. I have an autoimmune disease as well. So then that would kick off. And, I'd find myself in this position where I'd be like literally burning myself into the ground, but not having awareness either, because the ADHD, I didn't have any awareness of it, had little boundaries, nothing. And like the solution to that, to be honest, was just having that flexibility. So to be in law, for me, it's like everything. That I think there's so many lawyers out there that maybe either haven't been diagnosed or know that they are, but the model didn't fit them. It didn't work for them. And then the path ends, right? And people drop out and the talent drops out. So for me, it was life-changing to have that knowledge of why I was the way I was. I always felt very different, save for when I was in environments that were accepting or diverse. Like I went to university in the States, I went to Brown, which is like a very liberal institution, but everyone accepted differences. I didn't feel it so much there, but I felt it when I had to go into traditional structures or the things I'm really good at, like creativity, or other things I'm very passionate about. You can't really be yourself, I don't think, in certain stifling environments. But it's also losing the talent, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it is so absolutely difficult to work in a construct that is not made for you. It doesn't make you less of a lawyer. Actually, there's some amazing lawyers out there, but it's a system that doesn't work. So for me, it's absolutely critical, like in terms of, inclusion for everyone, of course, equity for everyone, diversity, yes. But the neurodiversity is a massive failing, I think, in the legal industry.
Yeah, quite well. Firstly, thank you for continuing to talk about it and being open about it, because it's really the first way of making this something that we can deal with and something we can change. And talking of change, right? Places that are accepting, places that are diverse. Yeah, how do traditional law firms? What can traditional law firms actually do to deal with neurodiversity, right? What would you wish you could say to your previous bosses, to your previous firms, about building neurodiverse, safe workplaces? What needs to change?
And actually, I was given it, to be honest. People respected me enough to give it to me, which is I'm grateful. But just as a practice, flexibility, and there shouldn't be a requirement to be in the office every single day. Absolutely not. That to me is ridiculous. Who's it for? Who is it actually for? Is it for the client? No, it's not. That's to fill your office space that is massive, that you need people sitting there, right? I don't know. I think it's just one of these things that flexibility you have to beg for it. Accommodations, it's humiliating, I think, for some people to have to go ask. I get a lot of, it's a bit sad, actually. I get a lot of younger lawyers, because I speak about it openly, like on LinkedIn. I get a lot of younger lawyers from Big Law call me to ask, should I disclose, should I not? I mean, it's like heartbreaking a lot of the time, because they feel that the environment, there is a stigma. You're different. It's not accepted as, well, you just think differently, but that's okay. It's like you're put in a box, as in there's something wrong and you need to ask for special permission to make this change, when actually what you're asking for a client space to work, or not have to do the commute every single day. I think COVID proved, to be honest, frankly, in a lot of ways, it was horrible, but it actually proved that the real value of people, the ones who are the hard workers, you saw through that immediately. Yeah. If RTO is your way of keeping the mediocre, like sitting there, then fine, but that is not necessarily what we're talking about. So I feel that policies that are just forcing people to have to ask, to beg for an accommodation or feel stigma when they do so shouldn't even exist, really. People should be valued on their value, not if they conform to the norm. So there's a lot to be said, but it's not changing, really, unless there is that sort of flexibility at the outset. And some firms are starting to do that a little bit, to be honest. And I think that when people are trusted and their colleagues respect them, then obviously, but that's not necessarily the norm, and very difficult for juniors, right? When you're starting out, like, you have to prove yourself, but like, how do you do that in an environment that's not fit? So it's just the blanket sort of view that everyone should be the same. It fails. And that's culture, to be honest. That's culture. That's nothing else. Yeah. And a policy is not going to do any, policy is a bit more dangerous than it is helpful, frankly. If you stand behind a policy to say that I have the policy, but you don't do anything with it, and your team feel, less than, that's even worse.
Yeah, quite. Well, I might be putting you on the point here, but you say you get called by juniors asking, should I reveal, should I not reveal? Is it as simple as a, yes, you should, or actually is your advice more nuanced than that? Or for the sake of our panel, the people listening in, right? What sort of advice do you give? What do they need to think about to be able to make the decision whether they should or should not reveal?
I mean, it's absolutely brutal. I think it's a really brutal one. I have to always ask them, like, tell me about yourself. Tell me about your work ethic. Tell me about, how your relationships at work, right? How many partners are you working with? In the sense of just to get a better sense of if this person is quite well respected or more insular. I never have the right answer. And I frankly will say, don't disclose, actually. If at the end of the day, you can't trust. I would love to be able to say, you can trust that honesty and transparency wins out in this situation, but like the statistics show, it does not. There's discrimination and it's rampant. So I oftentimes say, you've got to look after yourself first. This is not about a policy of asking, because you know what? If you've seen colleagues go in and they've come out feeling worse about themselves, like, it's not going to instantly change for you.
Yeah.
So I hate to say it. No, I have to sort of say, maybe this is not the right time, but maybe you should be doing something else instead, asking for something less, or whatever it might be, to help yourself thrive, help yourself actually thrive, get balance, right? Not burn out, and then use the right opportunity to do so. Because I just think the hierarchical structure as well, the more senior you get, you're more respected to say something. When you're more junior or you're coming in as a trainee, like it's not fit for purpose.
Yeah, it's very much the Carol Dweck open mind, fixed mindset in terms of approaches there. It's quite sad to hear, to be honest, that guidance you give. So let's pivot to the positive side of this, right? Yes. And there is, we say that there's a narrative emerging about how neurodivergence is a superpower. Actually, I think the message is out there. I think a lot of people know that different perspectives, different views, different angles can really fuel and supercharge innovation. And we are in a point in history where innovation in the legal industry is more important, more rampant, more exciting than I think we've ever seen before. So, have you seen that happen in Arbor Law? And if so, what have you seen? How has embracing neurodiversity brought innovation to your firm?
Yes. Okay. So tackling two things: the narrative of superpower. I'm not sure who's using it in the sense of, if they're not neurodiverse themselves, like, at the end of the day, it is a superpower if you're in the right environment. Culture, again, means everything. There's no way it's going to be a superpower if you are struggling with the small things around the edges that you can't even reach your potential. So with the neurodiverse, I mean, there's so much there, but it has to be harnessed, I think. And these are not difficult things, again, to get to that environment, but culturally, that has to be there, or else the neurodiverse are not going to succeed, frankly. And that's a really horrible reality. But it's, again, the small things that change, the small cultural changes, which are not that difficult to do. You open up this entire world of different thinking, but also just different thinking. It's the focus in the compassion in terms of the way that the client service is delivered. There's always sort of a different way of thinking about it, how that person is, at least in my own, experience. I can really get into really sort of fighting on that other edge for these clients that is different. But only when I'm in the right environment where I'm not burning out and I can actually apply myself.
Yeah.
So it's about, again, creating that environment. And at Arbor, we do. Like it's one of these things that, no, if someone wants to work flexibly, they can.
Yeah.
Are you doing the clients being serviced as well as they possibly can? That's fine. So again, yes, it can be an absolute superpower, but only so long as it's embraced. And I have to say, like, technology, that's a really interesting point, though. The technology sector has been working like remotely and flexibly for however many years, right? And you see that. So it doesn't become so much of an issue. Yeah. But when you have a profession like law or a sector that doesn't give you that, that's when you're shutting doors on people.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And we've gone 35 minutes and I haven't yet said the word AI or letters AI. So AI, right? I'm really interested. Is AI a tool that is helping you and colleagues with neurodiversity challenges? And then from a firm point of view, as a leader, is this a risk? Is it an opportunity? Is it both? Wearing your leader hat, wearing your practicing hat. How is AI helping or hindering or bringing risks to you?
I mean, listen, I think AI is, of course, the way of the future, right? And I have to embrace it. And actually, it's helped me personally with the organization, with a lot of things. From a firm perspective, I mean, there's massive opportunity, but there also is risk if it's not like adopted, I don't think, in the right way. I mean, personally, I've been struggling for like over a year now to figure out find the perfect solution for like my AML KYC. Because we also do financial services work. We do financial services managed compliance. And it's like, it has to be like perfect. So I know in my head exactly how it has to be with the risk management piece, all the rest, but nothing seems fit for purpose just yet. So there's a lot out there and it's the big buzz. We're testing constantly, like at least once or twice a week, we're doing another demo for something else. But for me and for us, it's more about 100% we're getting on the bandwagon, but it's finding the right solution that's going to bring value to the lawyers, like, free them up to use then their own skills and add better value, right? To the firm, not create a compliance risk.
Yeah.
And then for clients, like what is actually going to create more value, right? So it's evolving. I mean, we have the basic AI, right? Of course, but the really innovative solutions, it's something that they're just coming out all the time. And so we're sort of waiting to see in a couple respects, how it evolves a little bit before we take the plunge. But the good thing with us, we can be agile and do so, but we're onto it. No question, no question. Because it is the way of the future, right? That's it. And it can actually be really massive and helpful so long as it's used in the right way.
Yeah, and I guess that brings us back to culture, because actually, if you haven't got a culture where people feel empowered and trusted to use these tools, then they never will. And it's certainly something that we encounter with a lot of law firms. If they haven't got the right culture, then these tools are either seen as a threat or a risk, or they're unwilling to use them. So, yeah, well, what principles do you drive? How do you use your culture to encourage adoption?
Well, we've done town hall meetings, right? We've asked people all the time. We want their feedback. It's all about collaboration. So like we go out with surveys, we ask at our meetings, like, what do you think? What have you come across? Like, what are you interested in? So again, it's all about getting new ideas. And oftentimes then I'll demo something that, one of my colleagues has said, oh, I've heard about this. So it's about buy-in as well, but also sort of that open transparency as to like, we haven't adopted, a piece of one portion just yet, but the reasons are why, and so it's more that just that explanation, that full transparency. And with that, we then get to the right place, because then once we adopt it, everyone's bought in. So, but it's more just that collaborative effort and just getting feedback from the team is super important.
Yeah, no, indeed. I cough splutter, Lexis plus AI, cough splutter. So to wrap this up, right? I think there's some really interesting insights you've shared about the small law market. You've shared about the expansion. We talked quite a lot about neurodiversity and some of the things that larger law firms and smaller law firms can do. But maybe we just wrap up. Yeah, what might be one challenge you would urge the audience listening into this to focus on in the short term? What would you say is the top priority that your peers should be thinking about and trying to act on?
I mean, frankly, I think it's trying to break the mold. Is in terms of the peers in the same sort of area. If you agree that there is a better way to practice law, then it has to be that messaging that there is a better way. So long as you keep that quality up, there is a better way to help everyone. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm all about purpose and values, frankly. It's like how I get through my day, how I sleep at night. So, and it's sometimes really easy in the grind of things, in the stress, the pressure, to kind of lose track of that. You can kind of float on for ages and sort of things are just going in one direction. But then I think taking a step back and pausing to reflect. I did that this summer, took some time out just to sort of think and then be a creative, have like a whole sort of holistic approach as to what are we doing wrong? What can we do better? Having that space, that headspace, to me is so critical. Like just taking that time back, getting back to your purpose, getting back to your values, just to refocus, because it's quite easy to lose in the day-to-day.
Splendid. Kate Bennett, founder and director of Arbor Law, multi-award winner, champion of neurodiversity and ADHD. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and talk us through some of your thoughts and your insights. I think has given a lot of food for thought for me and hopefully too for our audience. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at our next one. Thank you very much.